guys are famous.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ken Chen. I'm one of the pastors on staff here at Calvary Chapel East Anaheim. And welcome to our Candidates Forum on the education-related positions on your June ballot. It's being brought to you by our church's Salt and Light Ministry. For those of you that are unfamiliar with our church that are here today, restrooms are an important thing to know where they are. And out there in the foyer area where most of you probably came in, they're on the left side. And also in this back corner, there are some double doors over there. And you walk through those double doors and just make a U-turn to your left. And there are restrooms there as well. So if you need restrooms, you know how to find them. Now, we're pleased, very pleased, to have as our distinguished guests for this forum candidates for the position of Superintendent of Schools, and that would be our present Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Al Maharas, and he is to your far right. And also on the ballot is one other candidate for that, and he's to my immediate left, and that would be Dr. Stephen Bean. We also have present in the middle over here to my left a candidate, Tim Shaw, who is running for the position of trustee in Area 4 of the Orange County Board of Education. There are other candidates running for that position, but none indicated an ability to be here with us today. So we'll be able to hear from him. Candidate Paulette Chafee did let us know that she was going to be unable to join us due to a family commitment, and suggested if you'd like to learn more about her candidacy, you can go to her website, which is easy to find through Google. Area 4, which is that election for the trustee, is Orange County is carved up into a whole bunch of different sections, areas. Area 4 covers part of Anaheim, Fullerton, goes all the way up to La Habra, and there are probably some other cities that are partially involved in that. If you're living in Yorba Linda, you will not find their names on your ballot, is my understanding. That's that. So that won't be helpful to you, but it will be helpful to you to hear what all the candidates have to say about some of the issues involving schools that we're going to talk about today. Our kids and their education. This is a really important topic. It affects their future and the future of our country. It's a topic of great interest and concern across the entire country these days. And I don't want to be an alarmist, but we do hear alarm bells kind of setting off somewhat in some sectors. And so it is wonderful that we can come together and talk about this subject. I am really thankful for the candidates we have at this forum. This country has a long history of working out problems through talking and listening to each other. And we're going to be doing some of that today as we hear from the candidates. In preparing for this forum, I had the privilege of talking with each of our candidates, and I did something unusual for something like this, but what I thought was the right thing to do. I made a decision to share my questions that I'm going to be asking with each of the candidates, and I did that yesterday. I made a decision because I think the questions that we're going to be talking about today, many of them are really important for all of us. And we're going to have just 3 minutes for each of the candidates to respond to each of those questions that I'm asking. And any one of those questions would probably take up a half an hour of time, probably maybe even much longer to discuss those things. And they only have 3 minutes, and I wanted them to know what the questions were going to be so they could, knowing that they have 3 minutes, figure what best they could do with that 3 minutes to respond to the questions. So they're tough questions. One of them, as I was sharing with them, it was interesting. It was kind of a wonkish kind of question, and I got some raised eyebrows, and that question came out. And we substituted in a new question that I think is really much more helpful for what we're doing today. So that process actually turned out to be really helpful. I'm looking forward to all their answers along with you. And what I'd like to ask everybody to do is to not react with clapping or booing or anything like that if you hear a position you agree with or disagree with. I want our focus to be on listening to our candidates, what they have, and to say, and to be very respectful to every view that might be expressed. This is not a competition. This is a time to listen and try and understand views that you might even disagree with. And I hope to think that this is a big step in the direction of trying to resolve some of the problems that are plaguing our country these days. We're going to be using timers for this, so because of the structure of it, and we have Bob and Lindy Smith sitting up here in the front row. Lindy's raising her hand, and Bob, as usual, is being very, very stoic, sitting next to her. But they've got some timesheets, and they have the numbers 3, 1, and time on it, which they can easily show to the candidates without interfering with what's going on. So they'll have a sense of how they're doing on their times. We're going to cover a broad range of topics, any one of which would be worth much more time. So we're going to start with opening statements that will be limited to 7 minutes for each candidate. I'm told by the sound people that I have a tendency to put my mic too close to my mouth. If you have it a little distance away from your mouth, you're going to be safe. If not, he might be waving at you. So I think it creates some kind of feedback problem, something like that. So we'll have the opening statements, 7 minutes each, and then I'm going to ask my prepared questions. I have 7 of them, and each candidate will have up to 3 minutes to answer that question. And what we're going to do is rotate the order that they answer questions as we move through that process. So we've also are hoping to have a segment where you can ask questions, and the way we want to do that is at the back of the sanctuary here, behind where you see the camera, there is a white table with a box in it with 3x5 cards. And there's some pens in there as well. If you have a question that you would like, that you think would be appropriate for this forum, I would encourage you to walk back there at any point, fill out your card, and just leave it in the basket. What will happen is, towards the end, as we're coming close to the end, I have Ryan Hoskins back there. I don't know how to describe him other than the name, but he's helping me with this. He'll be collecting the cards, and then what I want him to do is go through those and pick out the ones that are most relevant to our discussion, especially if they're things that we haven't talked about yet that seem like they would be a good topic of discussion. And so he's going to pick out 6 or 8 of the best if we have a whole bunch, and bring those up to me, and then I will go through them and ask questions from you. So do take advantage of that. That's sometimes some of the best questions come from you. So avail yourself of that opportunity. Now, turning my page at what I'm supposed to talk about. I have just one last thing that I wanted to talk about. Well, two things, really. At the end of all the questions, we're going to give each candidate 5 minutes to summarize whatever they would like to say at the end of the process. So they'll have something that they would like to share. But I want to point something out to you that you probably can't see, especially if you're over here on what's my far left. But I have a poster up here that is a favorite of mine. Actually, I love this thing. It used to hang on my wall, and in my office, it's gathered a little dust since then, but it's coming out today for this event. And the reason why is the original of this was painted by Norman Rockwell, and it's part of his 4 Freedoms series: freedom from want, freedom from of religion, freedom of speech, which is what this one is, and there's a 4th freedom that's not immediately coming to my mind. But they are wonderful. They're iconic in American history. And what I want to point out as you take a look at that picture is you see this man, kind of just a everyday Joe kind of guy, and he's standing up. And if you were close enough to look, you would see, well, gee, that looks like that's some kind of a hall or perhaps a chair that he's standing up. But notice what the people are doing that are around him. They're listening. And so he's getting up there, exercising his freedom of speech. He's got something in his pocket that looks like maybe a ballot or a bill or something that needs to be discussed. And he's exercising that freedom, and the others are listening. And I kind of picked that because I think it kind of conveys a little bit of the heart that I want to have for today with us, with our discussions. We're going to remain seated, I think. I didn't put up a podium or anything like that. So I think if you'd rather stand up, you certainly can. But feel free to also make your comments from a seated position. The candidate opening statements, each of them will have 7 minutes. I'd like each candidate in their opening statement to cover some things like their qualifications and their goals in relationship to this office, and of course they can share anything else they might like to share as well. And I'm going to start with Dr. Maharis, if you would.
Okay, thank you, Ken.
Too
Can I go?
close.
Pardon? Too close. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
You want me
much
to
better.
call you Mr. Chin or whichever?
Oh, Ken would
Ken
be
would be
just
good.
fine.
Okay, great. So thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here with you today. I don't know if you saw the picture that I sent to Angel. They were going to post it up here of my family. Did that get up there or not? Or
It should
somewhere.
be going up
Okay.
here soon.
Okay, there they are. It's kind of it was taken several years ago. But as you can see, my wife Jackie and I gave birth to 5 sons. And 2 of my kids are married. My youngest is married, and he has 3 sons. We wanted to have a little girl, but we couldn't. And of course, I joked with him and said, you got the gene. It's really a chromosome, not the gene, but I was teasing him a little bit. So this morning, that's my wind under my wings. Besides the Lord himself, it's the fact that I have a wonderful wife. We've been married for over 40 years. We got married right out of high school pretty much. And I remember my father questioning whether I would go to college and finish college. Previously to this conversation about me wanting to marry, I went into his room. He was laying down a little bit, and I told him I was going to get married. I wanted to get married, and I wanted his blessing. And he seemed a little stunned. But when we talked, he did not even go to the matter of college. He just said, remember, it's forever. And that was emblazoned into my head, and I think that was the same perspective that the Lord has upon marriage today, and it reflects the church and our relationship to Christ. That is forever. This marriage will not be forever, but the one we have with him will be. So let me just say this, that this morning I had the chance of watching my daughter-in-law and my son. They held a little baby in another church. It was all done through YouTube, so we streamed it. and they go to church in Northern California. And this little baby they adopted, they were trying to adopt a little girl. So they got into the adoption system, and they ended up doing 2 or so little babies that could potentially become theirs. And in both cases, that didn't work. But they got a call late one night, and it was a little baby boy. And now they had 3 boys. Would you like a little boy? And they said, of course. But today, after almost 2 years, the baby was born to a drug-addicted mother. And so the courts would not let the mother care for the child. So my daughter-in-law and my son cared for this baby. If she couldn't nurse with milk that she had, she would simulate it with a string to the baby's mouth so that the baby could touch her and feel motherly love. And this is a beautiful baby boy, but today was the day when she would have to reunite that baby with the natural mother. And it was very difficult for them, but this is a ministry they've taken upon themselves to help those who choose to have the child, which is the will of God, but to provide a support from the church for that child. In terms of my work in the Orange County Department of Education, I've been here for 10 years. Before that, I worked for six years for the College Board, the maker of the SAT and advanced placement courses. And then before that, I worked for just about 12 years as the superintendent of schools in Santa Ana. I worked also as the superintendent of schools in Bakersfield and in the Coachella Valley. And I will say to you that Orange County has probably the greatest, it's among the greatest schools in the country, certainly in the state. We compete often back and forth with the Silicon Valley, that's the Santa Clara County Office of Education, but when you look at the achievement levels of our 28 districts and what we are doing in terms of advanced placement courses, in terms of what we are doing in terms of international baccalaureate Cambridge courses, which is with Cambridge University. You can actually apply credit at the high school level to Cambridge University in England and get credit for that. And this is something else that we are doing. We have, our goal is to lead the nation in college and career readiness and success. We've created a number of metrics to measure that. Just one quick one in terms of advanced placement. If we were a state, 500,000 of us, just to show you by example, Colorado only has 800,000 students in the entire state. We have 6.1 million in California, 500,000 in Orange County. There's 58 counties. We are the third largest. It's LA, San Diego, and then Orange County. If you look at just our work in terms of advanced placement, if we were a state, we would be the 5th highest achieving state proportionately in terms of students who sit for the exam, students who take the course and sit for the AP exam. So you would have California would be the big dog, Texas, Florida, New York, Illinois, Orange County. That's how well our schools do in this great county. And that's testament to the independent governing school districts, all 28 of them, and the metrics that they have established. We have been a leader in terms of career technical education. And career tech today is different than the vocational courses that you might think about, where there was a bifurcated system. Some people wanted to go out of high school into a vocation. Some wanted to go into a profession. The profession required a college degree. Well, today, the skills to go into career technical education today, you need to have the same level of abstraction, the same level of subject level mastery that would be required for a college degree to make it in career technical education. Look at what many people are driving electric cars. My friend bought an electric car the other day. It has 6 cameras and 14 sensors. There's no way you can even touch fixing this vehicle unless you have gone through very stringent courses. Not only that, but we've also provided a host of intervention strategies in terms of meeting the social, emotional, and mental health needs of our students. Our kids have had problems in the world of mental health, suicide ideation, clinically depressed, or students who are extremely anxious. They have had problems even before the pandemic, but after the pandemic, that number has ratcheted up very high. And this is one area where Orange County needs to lead the state for sure, and that's on the intervention strategies, the things that we are doing for families and parents to keep them strong so that we can assure that our county is preparing the students for the next generation of labor in this country. And I think I'm out of time. Right, Pastor? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next opening statement is going to be from Dr. Bean. So if you'd, you have the floor.
All right, thanks, Ken. Good afternoon. It's just a pleasure to be here today. And, I tell people when I have the opportunity that God is in the business of saving. Look, it says in Titus that God came to save us not because of our own righteousness, but because of his great mercy. And I believe as I reflect on my 25 years of experience in education, we need to deliver our students from some of the things that we see going on in education today. And before I do that and talk about that, I want to talk about how God has delivered me. So I was born in Vietnam in 1971, and I was an orphan because my parents abandoned me on the streets of Saigon after I contracted polio, which left me paralyzed from the waist down. And I remember when I was 4 years old, April 6, 1975, the U.S. military, that's a little too premature, but we'll go to that in a couple minutes. The U.S. military came and executed Operation Baby Lift. Raise your hand if you remember Operation Baby Lift. Yeah, so this was an operation or a mission where the U.S. military was to come into to Vietnam, airlift the orphans out to then be adopted into the United States. Man, that day was so chaotic. Even as a 4-year-old, I sensed the tension. It was so chaotic that they put my records, my braces on one plane, and then they put me on another plane. But that one plane took off and it crashed. Over 160 orphans died that day. God delivered me and saved me safely to the United States. There I would meet wonderful parents, Gregory and Judy Bean. Gregory and Judy Bean, let me just tell you a little bit about them. Judy was this amazing mother who loved children. She had such a heart for children that we would have over 100 babies, foster babies, come and go through our homes. Then she noticed that some of those babies were taking longer to be adopted. So my parents adopted 10 kids, many of whom had disabilities, such as myself. And I grew up with 11 brothers and sisters because they had 2 of their own. And my dad was a 6th grade teacher. And he knew if I was to overcome my challenges with my disability, overcome the challenges of being in a new country, overcome the challenges of, learning English, that I would need to have the love of learning. And on a 6th grade teaching salary, he knew that that is what he was going to do to contribute to my education. And he did. So I did struggle in elementary school quite a bit. I had multiple surgeries, couldn't speak English. Education in the 70s had special education. It just came out, IDEA, special ed law. But people still weren't familiar with it. So they didn't know how to educate a student with so many medical issues. But my parents made the conscientious choice to take me from the public school system and put me in the private school system in 4th grade. And that's where I would meet Donald Geisinger, a 6th grade teacher. He would look at me and look beyond the challenges that I faced. Look beyond the fact that I was in a wheelchair or used crutches. Look beyond the fact that I could hardly speak English. And he noticed something. He says, Stephan, you have the gift of gab. So I want you to only give oral presentations for the rest of the school year. And I did. And that one act alone led to an invitation to Washington, D.C. to speak in front of 15,000 people on behalf of the disabled as a 14-year-old. That is what education should be about, is looking at our students with an asset perspective and unleashing the unlimited potential that they have. And so, because of that, that was a springboard to me getting straight A's in high school, then going to USC, fight on any Trojans in here. There we go, way back there. Going to USC, getting my master's degree, and then getting my doctorate degree. And I've had the honor and privilege of serving in education for the past 25 years. First as a teacher in Long Beach Unified, Clovis Unified, then as a principal of 2 different schools, an assistant superintendent, and most recently a superintendent. And I know the difficult job that educators have, but here in America, in this country, we've made it even more difficult. We have used when I say we, I mainly mean unions have mainly used students as a pawn in their little game. And what has happened is these ideologies have crept into education, and so no longer are we truly educating our kids, but we're indoctrinating our kids. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that through some of these questions, but I wanted to just tell you the reasons why I'm in education. And as a superintendent, you know, I wrote LCAP plans that we're going to talk about. I supported principles that we're going to talk about, but I have also witnessed what is going on in education, and I want to share that with you today. One thing I'd like to tell people, since I have a little bit more time, is that, you know, God does amazing things. When He brought me to USC, I had, many blessings that He gave me, but He gave me one awesome blessing, and that was catching the eye of one Janet Soros. Janet was an amazing girl at USC. By the way, I asked her out 3 times. She said no each time. And so I said, why, Janet? And she said, because I'm here at USC to love Jesus more and to get a USC degree, and to get a degree. I have no room for you, Stefan. So fair enough. So my wife and I have 4 beautiful children together. We got married in 2000. I never gave up. We got married in 2000, have 4 beautiful kids. And we instill in them, just like our parents, faith, family, and education. That's how we should center our lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear now from Tim Shaw. You know, we've got your family's picture is going to be going up there as well, but you've got some real competition of the cute
Dr.
family
Baharis and I
categories.
are in a fierce battle here, but I do have him beat. I have 6 boys, so we were, there we are. We were chasing a girl, and it was not in the cards. So we had a baby boy born in 2007, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17. So I had a friend in my church say to me, you know, he was having trouble, he and his wife, having a baby, and I said, well, so your challenges are not my challenges. If we can. Anyway, but I've had an interesting path to get here. I went to La Habra High School. I live about 2 minutes from the house I live in now. I grew up about 2 minutes away from where I live now, right there on the west side of La Habra. And I got myself elected to the La Habra City Council back in 2008, and I served for 13 years on the La Habra City Council. I was the mayor of La Habra in 2012 and again in 2018. And, you know, I enjoyed that and was having that experience. And really, I'm actually really the accidental pilot. My first plan in life was to be a professional pilot. So I got an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree in aviation and got my private pilot license and my instrument rating and was doing that. But then I decided I wouldn't be a pilot. So I went back and got my master's degree in government and came back. I went to Washington, D.C., to George Washington University. It was a really fun experience. I really loved it back there. But I had this, you know, this girlfriend who was at Cal State Fullerton. That's Shannon, who I came home to get married to, and we just never left. So she grew up in La Habra as well. So we're very blessed. But anyway, when I came back home, I ended up working for the governor. I worked as a staff member for a county supervisor and then a state senator, and got myself on the city council. And I had also, right when I came out of graduate school, kind of right place, right time, I got offered a job to teach political science part-time at Rio Hondo Community College. It's a community college in Whittier next door to me. And I thought, okay, that's cool. Maybe I'll do that for a year or two. And I'm now 18 years as a part-time professor there at Rio Hondo. So I've really gotten to enjoy that and being in the classroom and staying up on you know, things in education. But it was back in 2019. I was minding my own business as a city council member in La Habra, and I got approached by a group of people who said, Tim, you know, we'd really like you to run for the Orange County Board of Education. I said, it never had crossed my mind that that would be something I would think about doing, but they said, you know, we do need some conservative reinforcements here on the board, and we think you're the guy for it. So I kind of looked into that and went ahead and threw my hat in the ring, so to speak, and got elected back in 2020 to represent the 4th District. And just to clarify, I'll give you the exact cities. It's Placentia, Fullerton, La Habra, Buena Park, and then in Anaheim, west of the 57 freeway. So if you live in Anaheim Hills, you're in the 3rd District. But if you're west of the 57, you'll be in the 4th District and can vote in my race. So anyway, elected to the board, and we had quite an experience. I got sworn in July 1st, 2020, and just a few days later, the governor announced he was going to shut down the schools for the coming school year to in-person learning. So we had a kind of an emergency meeting, and we ended up joining a group that was suing the governor. So within my first week on the board, I was getting phone calls and text messages, my friends in Virginia and Maryland, "Hey Tim, how come I see your picture on CNN and Fox News?" And we were suddenly everywhere. I'm like, I don't know how I ended up here. I'm in the middle of this situation. But being on the county board is quite a different thing than what my colleagues here are competing for. To be the superintendent, they're going to be their full-time job. And they are the boss for all the employees at the Department of Education. The board, we have a 5-member board. Orange County is broken into 5 districts that elect a trustee. We actually only have 1 meeting a month. We're really mostly an appeals board. So if you live in one district but you want to send your kid over here to another district, you can ask those local districts to grant a transfer. A lot of times those local districts, we have 28 of them, they might say no, and then you can appeal to our board, and we would have the authority to overturn that denial and grant the inter-district transfer. So that's one thing that is done at our monthly meetings, is hearing inter-district transfer requests. Another big part of the job is looking at charter schools. You might have heard of charter schools. So a charter school is a public school. A lot of people kind of get the details wrong about charter schools, but it is a public school, public taxpayer dollars. If you want to ask the local district to charter your school, they could say no. Then you could ask the county board of education, and we could grant the charter. So I think the county board, we have at the moment, I believe the exact number is 20 charter schools operating across Orange County. So their charter has to come up for renewal every so often, and so we look at how they're performing as a school, and we can renew their charter, deny the renewal, or whatever we're going to do. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, the big things is looking at charter schools and their inter-district transfer requests. Now, what we don't do is get to decide the curriculum that's being taught. But there's nothing that stops us from talking about the curriculum. So we've held some forums since I've been on the board on critical race theory was obviously the big topic. So we kind of brought in an expert panel to discuss that. Just before I joined the board, they had a forum on what's called the California Healthy Youth Act, which is basically the sex ed curriculum. So these panels were put together, and if you go onto our board's website, you can see some of the white papers that got written there and some of that detail. But we don't decide the curriculum, but we can kind of put sunshine on the curriculum. And as they say, sunshine is the best disinfectant. So with that, I'll pause. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, each of you. We're now going to be moving to the prepared questions that I have. So they will each be answering my questions. They'll have 3 minutes each for each question, and we'll go through them question at a time. The first question has to do with defining of the roles. I'd like our audience to understand a little, and myself as well, about the positions that they're running for, the duties that are involved with the Orange County Superintendent of Schools. And because Dr. Maharis is fulfilling that position right now, he is our Superintendent of Public Schools. I'd like you to start off by giving us kind of a behind the curtain kind of idea of what's involved in this role. And then we'll follow up with Dr. Bean, who can comment and maybe perhaps ask some questions, things of that sort. Or not ask, answer, add some observations if you'd like. So your time starts now.
Thank you. So this is a great question because there's abundant confusion, I find, in terms of people's knowledge of what happens with the Orange County Department of Education. Why do we have an Orange County Department of Education? Why do we have an Orange County Board of Education? And there's a bifurcated structure of authority. There's a difference between duty and responsibility. So in terms of the superintendent, my job description is in the law. It's in several codes, but largely the education code. That will enumerate, it will list the duties that I bear. And there are, as I mentioned earlier, there are 28 school districts in this county. They all have duly elected boards. And these boards are able to hire the superintendent. In this case, I attain my job by going through the electorate process. Of the 58 counties, there are all but 5 that have elected superintendents. So the main duties and responsibility of my office is first and foremost to assure the fiscal solvency of the 8 school districts. And that's no simple task. We have a whole division, a whole unit that does all of that fiduciary responsibility to assure that tax dollars are spent appropriately. My position is a constitutional officer position. What does that mean? It means that the state constitution governs our public schools, and my position is in there. If you want to know, what do you do? Well, that's one of the things I do, too. I am also a servant of the state, which sometimes creates confusion. So with those responsibilities that I bear, the districts have to make sure that they can meet their annual obligations for a 3-year period, and they have to have a necessary reserve set aside. And my job is to help them get there. The other thing we do is to approve local accountability plans. There are 8 priorities established by the state. This all comes out of the State Board of Education, working in concert with the State Department of Education. These 8 priorities govern all aspects of student and staff behavior and parental behavior, in the sense of parents have a right to know. It's part of the process that their stakeholders, key stakeholders in the community, have a right to build these local accountability plans. When they are done, and the boards have officially approved them at a board meeting, they come over to my office to assure we're not second guessing all of the decisions made by the board. They've already gone through that due diligence. Our responsibility now is to assure that these things are going to meet the test of time for the California Department of Education, State Superintendent of Public of Education, to approve these budgets and the local accountability plans.
Thank you. Let's hold our applause. I think really maybe that will just save us some time because everything is applause worthy that we're saying up here. But let's try and keep things moving a little quicker. Dr. Bean, I'd like you to add your thoughts on the superintendent of schools position, the duties, and anything else related you'd like to say about it.
Yeah, Dr. Maharis did a great job explaining the duties of the superintendent. I think I'll share a little bit more of what the Department of Education does. The superintendent is the CEO of the Department of Education, but it's called a superintendent. And the Department of Education's job at the county level is then to guide and give support to the 28 school districts here in Orange County. Now, that support could look like training in various topics. It could look like legal support. It could look like trainings and support on how to write the LCAP, the Local Control Accountability Plan. It could be support on any programs that may come from the state through the county, then back into the local districts. So that's what the Department of Ed does. It also oversees charter schools, the county charter schools that Tim mentioned, about 20 in Orange County. One thing that I want to emphasize, though, is this LCAP. The county Department of Education has a vital role in fiscal management and accountability to the 28 school districts. And as I've been on in a lot of gatherings with families, a lot of parents ask a lot of questions about, we don't even know where the money goes. We don't know how the money is spent. And I kind of scratch my head because the LCAP, in there is a huge component called the stakeholder engagement component. Now, what I've found, because I've written over a dozen LCAPs myself personally for my organization, and I've actually consulted other organizations in the writing of theirs, and what I've found is that actually many districts will just checkmark that stakeholder engagement by saying, we offered video Zoom meetings. We offered a time for parents to come in and engage in discussion. But really, what they do is they only have like a 3-minute public comment to comment on LCAPs. That is not enough. So if I get into this role of superintendent of Orange County schools, I will assure and I will make sure that we look at those LCAPs very carefully to make sure that the districts are actually involving their stakeholders in the writing of these LCAPs. It is pivotal that parents need to be involved in this process, and this is how they're involved in that process through the LCAP process. Thank you.
And as part of question 1, we're going to now turn our attention to Tim Shaw, describing the trustee position with the Board of Education and your thoughts about fulfilling the responsibilities.
Sure. One thing too we might mention, the superintendent will prepare a budget annually that the board then votes on. So we can vote yes or no on the budget as prepared by the superintendent. We've had a fun time discussing whether or not the board can amend the budget before voting on it, and we've had our disagreement about that in complete candor. In the other boards I've served on, and at the city council, for example, when the staff prepared a budget, the city council could obviously amend the budget, change it, and then approve it. I served also on the Orange County Transportation Authority Board. We regularly did that. And the Orange County Sanitation Board I served on, we could do that. But we've been having the question here: can the county board amend and then vote on the budget? And we've just had a disagreement around that question. But one thing too we might mention is the students directly served by the county are those who are incarcerated, young people who have gone to juvenile hall, those who have been expelled. And basically they're kind of not in the traditional school system for some reason. So the number of those students will come to the county if you're in juvenile hall or you've been expelled for whatever reason. So over the years, and I can be corrected if I'm wrong, but I believe the number of students has fluctuated fairly wildly because just for whatever reason we have a lot of students who've been expelled at this year, and now a few years later we're down again. And I believe right now we're pretty low as far as our historical number of students that we're serving directly. But I mean, I was kind of explaining the role of the board is to hear appeals on interdistrict transfers and charter schools is a big one. But I'll be very candid. Our board has not shied away from controversy in the time I've been on the board. You've probably been reading about us in the press. We've really seen ourselves as out there wanting to fight for children, fight for parental rights, stand up. We have the legal standing to bring lawsuits where necessary if it comes to things like vaccine mandates or shutting down schools or things like that. We're going to be there fighting for parental rights, and we're going to try to plant our flag loud and proud.
All right, thank you each. We're going to move on to a second question now. I'm going to start with Dr. Bean on this one. And this really goes to a foundational question that I think it's important to ask and hear from each of the candidates. What do you believe is the primary purpose or goal of our educational system?
Great question. So the primary goal of the education system, at first, I'm going to listen to three things. One is to support our students, whether they want to go through college or college and beyond, or career pathway, or somewhere in between. Especially in what I call the Generation Mars, because that's where we're in right now. We're in a space-age world. Hopefully, in a couple of decades, we're going to be launching humans to Mars. Number two, we are to, as educators, supposed to be supporting and helping unleash the diversity of potential in all of our students. And I say the diversity of potential because each kid has their own strengths, and we need to tap into that. And then the third thing is then to also help our students to become active and good citizens of this world and of this country. So I know part of that question was, have we met or unmet? I mean, have we met those goals of education? I would say that there are hurdles to even the first one. If you look at the data, there's been research for the last 5 years. There is a shortage of students in the STEM careers. And that's just a fact. And the reason I believe is because we have, since 2008, introduced Common Core. We have tried to standardize education for everybody. Listen, not everybody learns the same way. And we all have different potentials and different gifts. And it used to be that teachers could come in, when I was a teacher, and teach what our kids needed at the time, not teach to a test. And that's what Common Core standards did. And so since 2008, that has crept in, and no wonder we have this data that we're short on STEM. Let's look at the second thing. Are we unleashing the potential of our kids? Not if we have the same standards across the board, because we all have different gifts. And if we are filling the minds of our kids with transgender ideology and CRT, that takes place of content. My sixth grade, my child has a biology teacher who actually has spent much of his time talking about transgenderism and not much about biology. That is wrong. And then the last thing, are we teaching our kids to be productive citizens? Well, if we are brainwashing them and indoctrinating them, then we're not teaching them to think critically.
All right, let's go to Tim Shaw. Your turn.
Thank you. Let's sum it up with reading, writing, arithmetic, right? We want so, teaching at the community college level, I assign a writing assignment to my students, and when I get them back, a lot of times they're tough. The grammar's wrong, bad, and I really feel like, good grief, sometimes, I'm in college here. We should be I wish maybe the K-12 level just needs to really stay focused. I agree with what Dr. Bean was saying. They got to stay focused. The minute you're wasting half the school day on silliness, you're not sticking with reading, writing, arithmetic. We're really doing a disservice to our students. Our schools should not be indoctrination camps. They need to just be ready to learn the skills necessary to advance to college and or a job. I know at our college, boy, the math department, I mean, almost nobody shows up to college ready to do college level math. I mean, of course there's plenty of students, but the community college has to really do a lot of catch up and make up work to those who are showing up, particularly in math and English. So I would hope that we can, stay as focused as possible on those core subjects. And I believe it's very important to teach patriotism and good citizenship. I'm an Eagle Scout. When I was a kid, growing up in the Boy Scouts, and just kind of part of what my family was doing, and I think it is helpful to have a school system that's teaching how wonderful it is to be an American citizen and how lucky we are, and part of that should be teaching respect and kindness towards others. So, but as far as the curriculum goes, reading, writing, arithmetic.
All right, thank you. Let's and go to Dr. Maharas. If you can give your thoughts on the primary purpose or goal of the educational system.
Yes, look, fundamentally, This is a sacred process. We believe that we're moving our students from darkness to light. The first compulsory education law was passed in 1642 in the colony of Massachusetts. And kids were asked to go to school so they could learn how to read, so they can read the Bible. That would be the most liberating force for these young people. In my life, my father was born in Mexico, Chihuahua, Mexico. He immigrated to this country. My mother was born here. Her parents were born in Chihuahua, Mexico, the state of Chihuahua, the city of Chihuahua. And they bore eight children. I'm in the middle. The one in the middle usually is the sane one. But the reality is that my father knew, even though he didn't have much of an education in this country, other than to be extremely wise, which I respected enormously because he was my mentor. But he knew that if I was going to be liberated, it would be through an education. Indoctrination happens at the point of birth. Train him up in the way he should go, and in the end, he will not depart from it. That's the Bible. The Bible says, look, you need to be training your children. And when I work with parents in Santa Ana, I tell them, look, your responsibility is to raise your children. The school district becomes a support system to you, a conduit so that you can do that. In the schools, I believe that our main job is to assure the literacy of our students. We have a program called Know My Name, Face, and Story. We want to keep our kids engaged and on point in their classrooms so they don't start to drop below grade level. And when that happens, we need to create compensatory programs that are going to enable students to do well beyond that point where it looks like there may be some slippage. Fortunately, in Orange County, we have closed the STEAM gap by working with the University of California, Irvine, Chapman University, Vanguard, Concordia, CSUF. What we are now finding, a few years ago, we had a big gap. Kids would choose STEAM or one of the STEAM, STEAM or STEM professions, whether it's engineering, math, technology, but they wouldn't complete the degree. They are now completing it, but they're not staying. They're going to the Silicon Valley, and not because you can buy homes there cheaper, because their homes are more expensive than ours. They're actually migrating there. We've found patterns of that, and our job now with the CEO Leadership Alliance and Orange County Business Council is to keep them here in this county so that we have the workforce necessary moving into the future. But fundamentally, the most liberating force in a person's life is to be educated, being able to read, having those skills, computational skills, numeracy, so that they can make sense of their world and make a contribution to this country.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next question. We're going to be talking about possible problems in the public school system, but before we move into that area, we need to spend some time talking about what's good, what we're doing right in our public school system. We don't talk about that much anymore, and I would love to hear each of you talk about that subject. And we will start with Tim Shaw.
Great. I don't think I mentioned my youngest son. He's 4. He was diagnosed with autism about 1.5 years ago. So we've got him right away into special ed preschool, and I'm in the Lowell Joint School District. It's a K-8 district out there in West La Habra, and I would say my wife and I are very pleased with the services he's receiving and trying to. I think everyone agrees with autism, the early intervention is key. So we're having him there at that preschool, and so I would compliment, at least in my district, in my experience, that's been very wonderful. I'll share another anecdote. My older boys and my nephews got together a month or two back, and they were playing out front, and after a couple hours, they came in and they showed us a video they had made. And it was like a movie. They just had filmed on their phones. They figured they're learning how to do a lot of technology and film editing and stuff on these iPhones. I wouldn't have been able to put it together. It was great. So I think that at least in my kids' experience, they're learning at a young age how to do some of the technology and stuff on computers. And at least in our district, in my experience, that's been very positive. So I would compliment them on that.
And Dr. Maharis, if you could share your thoughts on what we're doing right, what we're doing well in the public school system.
Thank you for that. That's a great question. We are doing a lot of things well, in my opinion. And you check this out locally. Go to your local districts. I often hear people tell me that they're doing this over there and that over there. Well, go to the local board. You have a right to look at all the curriculum. You have a right to look at all the textbooks before they're adopted, before they're assumed by that school district. You have a right to do this as citizens, and indeed you are the chief, as parents, you're the chief stakeholder, if you will. Frankly, it's the teacher, the parent, student configuration that matters most. But when you look at the levels of student achievement that we have in this great county, I'll just give you one, and that is that the number of classes that are being taken that are considered the courses of rigor, over half, about 55% or higher of all of our graduates are meeting the A through G requirement of the University of California and the California State University system. That is, they're taking 4 years of English, they're taking at least 3 years of math, they're taking social studies, 2 years of that, they're having to take a foreign language, they're meeting a very strong core curriculum, which will enable them to do almost anything they want to do after high school. Obviously, grade point average, things like that. What else do you do? That's all going to matter in terms of whether you go to Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3 university. The other problem, the other thing that we're doing right is that, you know, I have people always tell me, well, look at our PISA scores. This is the Program for International Student Assessment. They're so low. All of these industrialized nations come together, and the United States comes somewhere in the middle. Well, that's true in terms of an aggregate number. But when you disaggregate and you look at those students who have taken either International Baccalaureate, which is here in this country, or the students that are involved in advanced placement courses, you disaggregate them from the PISA scores, they go right to the top. And if you look at, for example, I remember when several years ago in Shanghai, they scored the highest rates in terms of mathematical attainment. And the chairman of the Communist Party said, that isn't good enough. You have one Steve Jobs. We should have 5 based on our student population. We want more than our kids just doing well on a test. We want to make sure that they can apply that to real life to solve real life problems. So my point is that even on an international comparison, if you dig into the data, and having worked for the College Board, it's a team of psychometrists. You dig down into the data, you will quickly see that the United States is holding its own in many, many areas.
Thank you. Thank you all. Let's move on to, I'm sorry, Dr. Bean. We're not moving on yet. I'm sorry.
No problem. Thank you, Ken. I'd like to focus on a couple of things that I've seen well in education, and that's something near and dear to my heart, and that's special education. I know Tim had mentioned this with his son. You know, when I came into the public system in the 70s, IDEA, which is special education law, just came about. What's been great is that we have reflected on that law and improved it and had several iterations of that law. And as I look at how our students with disabilities are being served in the school system, although it's not perfect, I don't think anything is perfect, we are offering those opportunities as a public system to support our students with disabilities. I mean, it's great to hear we have programs for our students with autism. It's great that in my district, I brought in the first augmented reality labs. And to see by the way, augmented reality is like virtual reality, except for you just have glasses and it brings these 3-dimensional objects out of the screen, TV screen. To see the eyes just light up in our students with disabilities, because it gives them another tangible way to access information and content. Their improvement on the standardized test actually increased because of that one tool. And so we're doing that in education, and I'm proud of that. The other thing is charter schools. I think that it's great to see that more and more districts, although there's a lot of resistance of charter schools, and we're going to talk about that later, but most charter schools actually offer a viable alternative education for students. And parents have the right to put their child in traditional public schools and put them in charter schools. And the reason why they're so successful is because they're innovative. They don't do education the same way that we've been doing it for the last couple of decades, which is around Common Core and NCLB. But charter schools meet and tailor their instructional approach based on a group of gifts from individual kids. And that's what I think is, if we can see that continuing growing, that will add to more quality traditional public schools as well, because best practices can then be shared. So certainly in those two areas, I've seen success. And I know that if we can stop the adult battles, we'll continue to see more success in those areas and others as well.
Okay, thank you all. Let's move on to question number 4. And we'll start with Dr. Maharis for this one. We have read in the news that there are many complaints across the country about school boards adopting teaching methods based on critical race theory, sex and gender theory, and social and emotional learning in their schools, to the alarm of many parents. Is this happening in Orange County? What is your view on these theories and its presence in the K through 12 school systems?
As you know, the state of California adopted a requirement to offer ethnic studies, that districts would have to come up with a curriculum entitled Ethnic Studies. That should commence the implementation in 2025, so that for the class of 29-30, those students should have taken one course. Now, the mistake that people make is that they make the comparison that critical race theory is synonymous with ethnic studies. I haven't seen one example of that in this county. There's only been a handful of districts so far, maybe a couple, that have adopted the program. Now, the state did create a model curriculum, which is how the state works. There's a commission of teachers and others that come to form, approved by the State Board of Education, as well as members of the legislature and the governor, and they create a committee. The committee created a model curriculum, but the state said, you don't have to follow that model curriculum. Every one of the independent districts in this county, any one of the 20, could come up with their own ethnic studies plan. And for me, ethnic studies is an example of showing the contributions that many cultures and people have made in our own history. It's about augmentation. It's about creating an opportunity to listen to the contributions made. Just recently, I talked to a member of the legislature who's Vietnamese, and she helps support the ethnic studies model. And she's a very conservative person. She came to see me, and we were talking about Vietnamese, Hmong, and Laotian curriculum that we're developing in terms of ethnic studies. And she said, I champion this, but I want to be part of this because I want to tell my story of having left Vietnam and how it happened to me. And I don't want anybody else to tell that story because right now there's controversy between the previous administration of the nation Vietnam during the conflict and the one now. And so we're going to create an opportunity for that to happen. But you know, we will throw out ideas, and it is true that I am the employer. I do hire people to do professional development. That is another duty and responsibility that I bear as a state constitutional officer. But the district will decide how it wants its ethnic study. Remember, we are all God's children. Every tongue and tribe, the Great Commission, Matthew 28:20. Make disciples of every tongue and tribe. This is an opportunity to come together and accentuate the contributions that many cultures and languages have brought to this great country.
Thank you. Dr. Bean, your turn.
Thank you for that question. So the simple answer to both of those questions is yes, it's in Orange County. And it's quite clear. So for instance, let's talk about ethnic studies for a second. Now, I know that a lot of people, the opponents like to say, well, critical race theory is not being taught in schools because we have ethnic studies. Well, that's actually, let's look at the foundation of ethnic studies. This is actually a presentation from the Anaheim Elementary School District given to its teachers just most recently. So if we look at the timeline of cultural relevant theory or ethnic studies over here, in the beginning we have critical race theory, and it says right there. So we have a evolution of critical race theory to then ethnic studies. Now, it may not be called critical race theory, but the tenets and the foundation are critical race theory. Now, ethnic study focuses a lot on culturally sustaining pedagogy. Schools support students to critique and question dominant power structures in society. That is right here in the presentation given to Anaheim. On the far left, critical race theory calls upon taking purposeful action to remedy inequality. Listen, I appreciate what Dr. Mahara said. We are all one. We are one human race. God created all of us. But when we use a theory like critical theory, by the way, which was long before critical race theory, critical theory is actually Marxism. Then it evolved into critical race theory in the 70s. Now, if we focus on such a thing and it pits one race against the other, then it becomes about racism. This is what I tell people. Critical race theory does not stop racism. It guarantees it. And that is what we're seeing.
Okay, folks.
Now, let me move on to the sex ed. Absolutely, we're seeing this in Orange County. So here's a inclusive PowerPoint presentation to the teachers of Santa Ana Unified. And in it, it talks about exactly what the state government wants us to do, and that is teach on LGBTQ things. And here's why they say, why talk about LGBTQ now? The first bullet, why not? Now, in this PowerPoint, it gives some resources of read aloud books that can be given to kindergartners. Here is one of those read aloud books. Who Are We? The Kid's Guide to Gender Identity. Let me just read a quick passage. Babies can't talk, so grown-ups make a guess by looking at their bodies. Are these books geared to sixth graders? Absolutely not. They're geared to our kindergartners. We need to stop the CRT. We need to stop the sexualization of our kids and just educate.
And Tim Shaw.
Thank you. I see my friend Brenda Lebsack here. That is you, right, Brenda? Okay. I want to make a pitch for her website she's put together, brenda4kids.com, and that's the number 4, brenda4kids.com. She's just put together all the information you'd want to see. You know what, I made the mistake yesterday of going to brendalebsack.com, and this is unbelievable. Do you know that the bad guys took that domain and they've linked it to a donation page for Planned Parenthood? If you go to brendalebsack.com, it will be taking you to donate to Planned Parenthood. By the way, Planned Parenthood is one of the big funders in the races for Orange County Board of Education. Not to my candidacy, as you might have guessed, but to but to others. If you go on the ocvote.com, you can look up campaign donations, and Planned Parenthood is spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars out there. So my colleagues Mary Barkey and Lisa Sparks are also on the ballot. You will see their opponents are getting thousands of dollars from Planned Parenthood. But my experience is funny. This question came up just a few days ago. My oldest boy is about to finish 8th grade and is going into high school. So the Fullerton High School District sends the parents an email, and it says, next year your son's going to be given a sex ed lesson. And here you go, click here to see what's going to be taught. And so it's quite long. I mean, I was sitting there yesterday for hours going through it, but it's the stuff you might have expected, you know, anatomy, where do babies come from, the stuff I learned as a student, Then at the end, it starts getting a little into stuff that I didn't learn, sort of thing. So, it's, look, we live in a fun state called California, and our legislature is what they are, and they're passing. I'm trying to keep it, we all know what's going on here. So what we need to do is have the parents really, in my experience, and I believe this Dr. Maharis said is correct, parents can review the curriculum before it's taught to them. And when you review it, and if you don't like what's happening, you can opt your kid out. Now, you can't entirely opt them out of the lesson on anatomy and where do babies come from and all that, but you can take them out of the class and kind of make sure that it's being taught in a way that's acceptable to you. So I would strongly encourage all parents to look at that option. And did you guys see what happened over in Virginia recently, in the race for governor there? The candidate who was the hands-down favorite to win accidentally said out loud, parents shouldn't have any say in their kids' curriculum. And this guy was in their kids' education. And by saying that, of course, he was supposed to win the race, and then he ended up losing. So as they say in politics, a gaffe in politics is when you accidentally say out loud what you really think. And obviously, he accidentally said out loud what he really thinks. Oh, I'm done. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move to question number 5. And actually, if I was in a courtroom and I was an attorney, again, I'd have an objection to this question, the way it's phrased. So I'm going to point out that objection to this question that I'd make. But what is your view on public charter schools, and why is there so much resistance in many school districts to charter schools? And that's the problem that I have with assumes the fact, not in evidence, that there is, in fact, a lot of resistance. I don't know that for a fact, but I'd love to hear our candidates talk about that subject. And with this one, we start with Dr. Bean.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's not a secret that there's resistance to charter schools. That is clearly made known by the teacher unions. The teacher unions have fought and spent millions upon millions of dollars to the state Sacramento Capitol to fight charter schools. In fact, there is one bill that they want to push through that will defend charter schools. So it's definitely well known that there is resistance to charter schools. My thought on charter schools is this. Look, as I said, not every student learns the same way. We need to be able to provide different choices for our parents in terms of where those educational settings can be. Charter schools are amazing schools. Most of them are. I ran actually a network of charter schools as superintendent, one of the most successful ones actually in our country and even in the world, Aspire Public Schools. And we did amazing things because we were able to be innovative. Charter schools, if you use this analogy of the Titanic versus a speedboat, the Titanic, when faced with the iceberg, took very slow in getting around that iceberg and it crashed. That's what most districts are like. That's what most districts are like. They are just too top-heavy, okay, in the people that they work for them. Then you have the charter organizations, more nimble, more decisive, can react to the different currents that happen. And so when they see that iceberg, no problem, it can go around it. Charter schools innovate. And there's a lot of resistance because what happens is that the unions believe that charter schools takes away the money from the unions. And you know what? They actually do, because the teachers that work in these charter schools aren't paying those union dues. Many of them, at least. Now, there are some that do actually have unions. But, so that is real. Districts are fighting charter schools all the time because these students, they're not getting the money from these students because the charter schools are. Listen, LA Times article just came out. Enrollment will be dropping 30% in the next 10 years in LAUSD. And we're going to talk about why. But one of them is because parents know they can put their kids in private school, homeschool, charter schools, or traditional public schools as well. And that decrease in enrollment is a good thing for education because it's going to increase the quality of education across the board.
Okay, and Tim Shaw.
Thank you. I have found that people are generally misinformed a little bit about what a charter school is. And the polling I saw anyway do you generally have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of a charter school? And even in California, it was something like 50% favorable, 25% unfavorable, and 25% weren't sure, I mean, in rough numbers. So I think most people, by about 2 to 1, do generally have a favorable opinion of charter schools. But I'll use my personal life as an example real quick. When I was in high school, I was not a strong student. My mom will tell you I did not perform well academically. When I went to college and I could major in aviation, well, that was cool and exciting to me. And suddenly, boy, my GPA, I got all 4.0, of course, in my aviation classes. So when learning is fun for you and it's something that you're interested in, you're going to excel. So if you have a young person who knows that at a young age, hey, I want to do, maybe they're really good at math and science. We have math and science academies. We have in Orange County, the Orange County School of the Arts. If you've ever heard of OSHA, well, it's unbelievable what they do, right? If you go down there, there's a lot of young people that this is their thing, music, or they even have culinary arts there at that school. So, in my opinion, we should let young people, if they want to focus in a little bit on a curriculum, let them do that. It will make learning fun for them. They will thrive. They will excel, and we shouldn't inhibit that. Another misconception about charter schools: it's only for the kids of super rich people and privileged people, which is simply also not true, right? So, we have a great charter school I visited recently in Anaheim. The whole model is to take young women who've had a baby in high school and they didn't graduate from high school. In their school setting, they have a daycare place right here. The mom can bring the baby, the young one, and then go next door and finish their high school diploma. So, I mean, it practically brings tears to my eyes every time I walk in there. This is a charter school. Obviously, it's a unique setting. It's not the traditional school, but it's what's needed for that student. And what a blessing and what a miracle to have these charter school options. It won't be for everybody necessarily. My kids are attending the traditional neighborhood school, but it can be a very invaluable, wonderful option for some. And to me, let's let that option exist.
Ken, Dr. Mahars.
Yes, thank you. I agree that part of the beauty of this great country is that it's subjected to the open market. And the hot breath of the open market makes you get better. In the late 1990s, when charter schools were first configured or thought up in this great state, it was done by 2 key people in Sacramento, Gary Hart, Senator Hart, a Democrat, and Marion Bergeson, a Republican. Many of you remember Marion Bergeson. She then went on to be the Secretary of Child Development and Education for Pete Wilson. And the charter school movement began with, first we're going to try 10% of the population could go into a charter school. At that time, charter schools were freed of all of the codes, the education code, the welfare and institution code, the government code. They were freed of all the laws. Now go out and innovate. Incubate, innovate, come up with great ideas that you can share with everybody. That has all changed. There was very little accountability for charter schools. There's more today, and I think that's good because you're using tax dollars. If you want to start a charter school and you can get your petition approved, you'll immediately get about $500,000 to start that school. There's no other business that I know is going to give you $500,000 to go and start a new business. And that's taxpayer money, so we have to submit to the same grid of accountability now. We don't have 20, we have 30 that our board has approved in Orange County. I think I'm the only person on the platform that, other than Dr. Bean, because I know he's a board member at the Orange County Academy, sorry, I forgot the name of it, the Academy in Orange, that charter school, he's on the board. In my case, I was involved in the leadership of establishing 7 charter schools here, and including the moving of OSHA from Los Alamitos to Santa Ana Unified. And that's, as he said, as Tim said, that's one of the best charters in the country. So my personal feeling is that we should learn from each other. I can't get into all the other dynamics because some of that is hearsay, some of it is it's generalization. I know this, that the teacher unions or the teachers and those who are in those, after the Janus decision, Guess what? That's the decision that said you can be free to paying teacher dues. Their dues have gone skyrocketed up. They have more members today than ever before. And my thing is this, you can't do it without the teacher. We have to find ways to bridge the gaps of differences in terms of ideology or how money is spent. But we have to engage the classroom teacher. We're already in a teacher crisis now. I'm not saying a bad teacher, one who has equivocated on the highest standards for our students. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the teachers who are doing a great job. And I believe that we will find, and there are more who have created unions in the charter school movement today. So we can't just go after that in a myopic manner without understanding that the picture is much bigger than that and complicated than that. But I do believe that charters are a viable way to make a contribution to the classroom.
I'm looking at my clock, and I know that at least one of our candidates has got a commitment that needs to leave very quickly. I had two more questions. One of them was on homeschools that largely, I think, probably tracks some of the, perhaps some of the discussion that we've heard on public charter schools. I know we've got a lot of homeschool families in our church, and they're going to be disappointed that we don't talk about that. But I think I'm going to set that aside in order to move along a little more quickly. And the other question I was going to ask, but I'm going to set aside as well, is we've all been shattered by the mass shooting in Texas that took the lives of 19 young children and 2 teachers. And I was going to ask for policies to mitigate and hopefully prevent the risk of a shooting at an elementary school in our schools. I know that there is nobody in the public school system in Orange County that wants this to happen at their school ever. And I'm sure that that's being actively discussed. I don't think it's something that we need to add anything to here in this format because of our time constraints. And I do want to end with some closing statements, an opportunity for each of them to have 5 minutes to summarize however they would like their time. So I'm going to start with Dr. Bean.
Thank you. Well, it's been a privilege to be here today and just to share our thoughts around education. And I kind of wanted to close a circle, what I shared with you before in my opening statement. My wife Janet and I spent many years, even during the years of being a superintendent and assistant superintendent, about the state of education. And we knew that no matter what happened, as long as we grounded our kids in faith and in family and in education, that they're going to be okay. Well, we worked hard on doing that, and tragedy struck our family in 2014. My wife was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, and she'd been suffering from migraine headaches for 6 months. Finally, we were able to get a scan. We went in, and the scan showed 12 tumors in her brain. It had already metastasized to her brain. The doctor told her she had 6 months to live. Because we're praying people, we that evening prayed, we cried, we prayed. The next day, Janet came to me and said, "Stephan, God answered our prayer. He's going to extend my years." Praise God, he did. That 6-month life sentence went to 6 years. So my wife was able to be around for 6 more years in the most pivotal times of our kids' lives. She was able to instill in them only what a mother could instill: the love, the kindness, the compassion that a woman displays to people. And they were able to receive that. And I remember about a year before she passed away, because that last year she couldn't speak any longer, she said, "Stephan, make me a promise." I said, "Sure, what is that?" "Please protect our children." And as I reflect back, she wasn't meaning protect just our 4 kids. She meant protect all of our children. And so I took that to heart. And what she meant is we need to protect our children from the indoctrination that is going on through the comprehensive sex ed. We need to protect our children through critical race theory. We need to protect our kids through the politicking that people use our children for. Our unions use children as their pawns. Our lawmakers use children for mandates. And I'm going to end it with this, is that how many of you have read George Orwell's Animal Farm? Okay, in there was a dictator, the pig. He's the dictator of the farm. His name is Napoleon. Napoleon sees these puppies that have just been born. He decides he's going to take the puppies away and educate them because he thinks he knows better. So he educates those puppies away from the parents. He returns those puppies, and guess what they've grown into? Ferocious dogs doing the bidding of Napoleon. That is what is happening in our state. And the jig is up. It is time for us to stand. That is why I'm running. I resigned as a superintendent of schools because it is now my Daniel moment, my Esther moment, to stand up against this nonsense. It is time for us to protect our kids, and we can do it through education, true education. And so with that, I would hope that you would honor my promise to my wife, and please, let's protect our kids. Thank you.
Okay. And Dr. Maharis, your closing statement.
Thank you for that. I do want to acknowledge the crisis in Uvalde, Texas. And thankfully, we work hard. There's not a sleeping moment here in terms of the work that the Orange County Department of Education is doing with the Sheriff Barnes and all of the other police municipalities outside of the sheriff's sphere of influence. We have an OCAIC, it's called. It's the Orange County Intelligence Assessment Communication Unit. We meet monthly to talk about how to detect a threat to our environment or our schools. No clue is left alone. We seek every which way in terms of connecting with our community to make sure that we don't have that happen here. And this is a job that requires expertise. When I was mentioning, or when critical race theory came up a minute ago, remember, 2025 is when they're supposed to have it done. There's going to be discussions. They're going to be talking about these terms. But guess what? Your teenagers can look up critical race theory. The little device that they have in their hand, it'll tell them everything about the world in many ways. We just have to teach them how to understand that this is not about exploitation. It's not about trying to segregate one race over the other. It's about inclusivity. But I want to say this, that this job requires abundant experience as well as tremendous integrity. Integrity, character, it's one of the pillars of 21st century learning. You can't do it without strong character. You're going to be met with a crisis almost daily, and there's no opportunity for pat answers. You have to be ready. You have to be prepared to provide an answer that's going to assure the safety of our community, that's going to create excellence in the classroom, that's going to help us achieve. When you look at Orange County, people use words to describe things happening in the state or at the national level, but you have to really look at the county itself. How are we doing? Go into our local schools. Look at what they're doing. You have a right to access this data, and if you don't get it from them, there's the Office of Civil Rights. There's places for you to grieve that. The Orange County Board of Education really cannot help that problem. Remember that in 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court, our great Supreme Court, approved gay marriage. That meant that when we do the Healthy Youth Act, CHIA, California Healthy Youth Act, and you're teaching kids how to prevent the spread of AIDS, how to prevent sexually transmitted diseases, that has to be taught to those individuals who claim to be gay, LGBTQ, and they can get the same diseases. This is a law in California, and we are a law-abiding community. You can't cherry-pick which laws you're going to follow and which you are not. You have to be careful for people who throw out all these promises, but the reality is when you look, what does the law say? Folks, Romans 13, government officials are ordained, and those that do not follow them, St. Paul uses the word condemned. It's the same word that Christ used to condemn the Pharisees in Matthew 22. Peter, 1 Peter 2:13 says, obey every ordinance of man. Paul and Peter, they preached in probably the most despicable environment of all. And they said, you know what, we must understand. It's like Psalm 47, verses 6 to 10 says, I am the God of all nations. God is in control of these things. I do think, as in the books of Acts 4 and 5, if they're telling me I can't practice my faith, I should stop praying, that's when I think we should say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to be like Daniel. But, folks, we have to understand that God is in control. That's why I love C.H. Spurgeon so much, because upon his deathbed in 1892, at the age of 57, it was almost like a coronation or some kind of the death of a member of the royal family. People poured into London, tons of people everywhere. And on his casket lay a Bible. And the verse there was Isaiah 45:22, which says, look at me and be saved, all ye nations of the world, for I am God. You know what? The reality is that he is in control. And I have ways to grieve. We do grieve with the State Department. We do grieve with the governor. We make our pitch that is not in the best interest of our county. And we do it in a way that we believe is peaceful, just as you have a right to peacefully protest. That's how we do it. But we do it with a sense of respect. 1 Timothy 2:1, pray for those who are in these positions. Pray for the king. That is my point. As Christians, we have a responsibility. But I also believe that this is not a job for a novice. We have almost $8 billion budget that we must govern. And for that purpose, you really need the experience to do this job.
Thank you. And Tim Shaw.
Thank you. Well, I would love to have all of you visit my website, shaw4schools.com. It's SHAWFOR schools, shaw4schools.com. We also have a Facebook page up, Parents Defending OC Board of Education. So as I mentioned, my colleagues Mary Barkey and Lisa Sparks are also up for election, and this Facebook page is there to support our conservative candidates. And obviously, our board will strongly take the position that we want to empower parents in the education of their children and offer that school choice anywhere we can, and fight for you. We have taken our arrows, we've taken our shots, but we're out there trying to fight for what we genuinely believe is the right thing to do in helping support our great parents and students out there. So please visit those websites and those Facebook pages. I'd be honored to have your vote. And one thing too, I would, in closing, we were talking about this whole critical race theory and the issue of what's the curriculum that's being taught. And I just love thinking about when we're here in the United States of America in the 21st century, and I feel like every morning we need to roll out of bed, drop to our knees, and thank God that we live in this time in this country. We've had horrible things happen in our country's history, of course, and they should be taught to our students. We've had terrible things with slavery, with segregation. We don't have a perfect country. We don't have a perfect history. It should be taught so that these mistakes are not repeated. But we can't lose sight of the fact that we are an abundantly blessed people to be alive today in this country with this Constitution. And let's remember the big picture and praise God for those who came before us and founding this great country and giving us this opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you all. I'd ask that you join me in thanking our candidates for the sacrifice of their time, and I thought, nope, that's not right. They haven't been sacrificing their time. That you can see their devotion and their care for our kids and our school systems, and for them it was just a further extension of their passion for what we're doing in education. So let's thank them for coming here and sharing their thoughts with us. Folks, we do not have time for questions, unfortunately. I had hoped that we would, but boy, we were slower than I thought. So remember to vote. Remind those that you know to vote as well. And God bless you all, and God bless America. You're dismissed.